Let me set the scene. It's 1960. Things are tense between the US and the Soviets. America's trying to detract from the attractiveness of communism, and the Soviets have started exposing something obvious. America's racist. That's why segregation was dominating its politics. So the US tried to clean up its image, downplay the negatives, highlight the positives. That's why in October 1960, the jazz legend Louis Armstrong went on a tour. It was sponsored by Pepsi. 2 months in Africa, south, west, east, central and north.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
But one part of Louis Armstrong's Africa tour wasn't sponsored by Pepsi at all. Only the US State Department. Louis had no idea what he played a part in.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
This was the Congo leg of the tour, a chance for American spies to visit the field. And that's why Louis was booked for 2 cities, Leopoldville and Elizabethville. See, Congo was going through a power struggle, but only one leader was legitimate still, Patrice Lumumba, and his main enemy, Moise Tshombe, lived in Elizabethville. 4 months back, Congo won its independence. Patrice was seen as the man who finished the deal, but regardless of his commitment and skill, his legacy would be dreams that he didn't fulfill. See, Patrice had a different appeal. He was clean-cut, self-taught, and he was homegrown. But by the time Louis came to Congo, Patrice's enemies had made him a prisoner in his own home.
The audacity of Lumumba and the Congolese people is that they thought they could set the terms of how the resources should be shared. What were they thinking?
Oh, please believe the CIA was lurking, paying off politicians and putting work in. See, the Congo was super important, not just for Africa's future performance, but also because it had the richest deposits of an element that was useful to Europe. It was called uranium. What do you know about uranium? The secret ingredient of nuclear weapons, like them bombs that wiped out and mutilated generations of Japanese in mere seconds. Now that the Soviets were stronger than ever, carving out a much more confident era, the US was paranoid. And to anyone who shared their approach to the world, they had a point. See, if the Soviets did what the US did with that uranium, that would turn an arena of war into a stadium. So America set off on a race to secure the bulk of the Congo's uranium ore. Now, the problem is, Congo's mines were run by Belgian colonists. But the country just got independence. The people weren't trying to be exploited by selfish foreigners. America had to find a way to take control of Congo undetected. So the CIA moved into the country and put money in places that no one suspected. Businessmen, diplomats, union leaders, journalists, interpreters, students and teachers. They could make the fakest protests look real or cause others making progress to chill. The plan was to remove Patrice Lumumba, even though he was democratically elected, because deep in the heart of the Western world, African independence hadn't been accepted. If the Congo was truly independent, the Western world would be dramatically affected. That's why the white supremacists felt entitled to everything that Congo naturally was blessed with. Now, it's sad to say, but Patrice was naive. He put a lot of faith in actors and pretenders. So how did that work out? We gotta go back to independence. In the months leading up to Congolese independence, the freedom fighters sat down with the Belgians. Congo's leaders were young and inexperienced, but Belgium offered to help them. These negotiations were known as the Round Table, or Table Ronde. The Belgian strategy was to pose like friends, but keep complete control of the Congo's natural wealth in the hands of the same old white men. Before the new independent state was a day old, the Belgians grabbed certain assets that were state-owned and they left the debt. So what did Congo take home? Belgium finessed the Congo during independence negotiations. They established a lengthened association and extended expropriation. So was it really that surprising when the country saw its first serious uprising less than a week after Independence Day? The army broke down over racism when Belgian officers announced their intent to stay. Rage exploded from the hearts of the Africans. 6,000 Belgians had to flee. All this because white supremacy couldn't respect African freedom. It was sad to see. Now, 10 days after independence, Belgium sent soldiers back into Congo. They claimed their aim was to protect Belgian property, but clearly it was to re-establish a stronghold. According to the rules of the United Nations, this was a violation.
The Security Council shall determine the existence of any threat to the peace or act of aggression and decide what measures shall be taken.
Now remember uranium, the metal America wanted to keep out of Soviet hands. Belgium and the US made a secret deal that required regaining control of the land. They had to find a way to export 1,500 tons of uranium ore, undetected. And there was no way a prime minister like Patrice Lumumba would leave all that uranium unprotected.
They thought they could set the terms of how the resources should be shared. What were they thinking?
So not only did Belgium sabotage independence, in 10 days they reinvaded Congo, and the day after that, a certain part of the new country announced it had gone rogue. This was Katanga, led by a man called Moise Tshombe. Tshombe came from a family with a strong name, and he wanted power, so he played the long game. For years, he'd been pushing for a split, for his part of Congo to stand on its own. This was a stance that much of Katanga condoned, because back in the day, they were standing alone. Chombe wanted to be the Belgians' friend. He had zero qualms about helping them, and he didn't mind stabbing Lumumba and the rest of the Congo in the back for his own selfish ends. But what was so special about Chombe's area? It's where all the uranium was. If he could get Belgium to recognize Katanga as a separate state, that would make him a boss.
Then they take Chombe. You heard of Chombe. He's the worst African that was ever born. The lowest type that was ever born. A killer.
So Chombe had Belgium support in exchange for the uranium he'd helped to export, and we can't forget the fact that the CIA was paying him. But love for Lumumba was unwavering. Patrice Lumumba was prominent and was popular. Unlike Chombe, foreigners didn't prop him up. He was real. That's why the people loved him. But when he asked America for help against Belgian invasion, they snubbed him.
I wish to convey to the entire American people a message of friendship from the Congolese people. We want you to understand us and help us.
I said it before, Lumumba was way too trusting. He couldn't see that all Western powers wanted one thing: Africans in their place in the global division of labor. Even if it meant sabotaging governments and keeping people locked in conditions of danger. Lumumba was only suspicious of the Belgians because he had witnessed their resistance to change. But just like Belgium, America built wealth on the backs of Africans in a system of pain. Patrice's mistake was believing the fake proclamations that leaders would scream in the States about freedom and faith and the rule of law and democracy and the sacred job of keeping it safe. After all that, these so-called democracies left Patrice hanging. He and his supporters were outraged. Then there was a period of wild change. The UN told Belgium to stand down. Belgium said, "We ain't standing down, I think we'll hang around." So the UN sent thousands of soldiers from all over Africa into the nation. The Congolese were relieved to receive troops who weren't there for robbery or intimidation. But among the soldiers were more white supremacists, and Lumumba's government promised to put an end to this. Now this is where Patrice's naivety really becomes a liability. See, even though Lumumba had won the election, he was surrounded by double agents under protection. Joseph Desiré Mobutu was someone Lumumba saw as a younger brother. Lumumba was warned but did nothing about the fact that Mobutu was working with CIA undercover. They say Lumumba's trust in Mobutu was so strong, it's like he believed the youth could do no wrong. And that's why he gave him a senior position in the Congolese army. Big mistake. But Mobutu wasn't the only snake. For him and his peers, getting rid of Lumumba became a team pursuit. They were known as the Binza Group, because after independence, these guys moved to where the colonizers used to stay, a place called Binza, and they all teamed up. As well as Mobutu, Army Chief of Staff, there was Victor Ndaka, another Congolese politician. They'd followed Patrice on his mission, but maybe they both believed Congo needed Western support in order to keep on existing. Or maybe, instead of dealing with the stress of independence, they'd rather take a fee from the system to weaken resistance by denying their people's subsistence. Ndaka and Mobutu both started dealing with the CIA in Belgium. They were being groomed for a coup and paid for whatever they could tell them. The Bienza group included the so-called president, Joseph Kasavubu. He wasn't elected. The Belgians gave him that position for no reason other than to make sure their stuff was protected. So on the 5th of September 1960, when this Western-appointed so-called president announced he was replacing Lumumba with a new prime minister, Cyril Adula, all hell broke loose, as you can imagine. Patrice wasn't having it, as you can imagine. Mobutu had him arrested. Can you imagine? All his enemies lined up to do a mad thing. Now Congo was on smoke for their national treasure. Mobutu released Patrice under international pressure. Then he took over the country, but that was not enough. He kept sending goons to try lock him up. Eventually, Lumumba was trapped in his house. Soldiers couldn't get in, and he couldn't get out. And this was the Democratic Republic of Congo that Louis Armstrong arrived in. Remember the tour America sent him on? The one where the CIA went along? Remember how the region of Katanga broke away? America couldn't deal with them in an open way, so they used that tour as a cover for meetings with Belgians and Congolese running the region. Meanwhile, the real government leader was trapped in his home, with soldiers outside aiming straps at his dome, posted all around. The CIA made a plan to draw him out. The Lumumbas had a baby that sadly passed away. The thought of not burying her was hard to take for Patrice, hard enough to make him chance escape. And of course, the CIA knew this. So they orchestrated a manhunt through their paid stooges. Patrice went underground. He popped up here and there, but he never hung around. See, the Prime Minister's home was in an enemy stronghold, where he could be killed on a soldier's orders. So with the help of friends, he tried to cross the Congo to Stanleyville, where he had the most supporters. For days, he moved in secret, overcautious, hiding from police that patrolled the borders. The whole world watched with bated breath, knowing if they caught Lumumba, he was facing death. And sure enough, with the help of the CIA, Mobutu's troops managed to trace his steps. When those men caught Patrice, they paraded him through the streets for all to see, held him in a cell for 3 days with no food or water. Marks on his body were due to torture. Images of the capture circulated the world and sparked international outcry. The West seemed to approve of these illegal moves, even though they couldn't say that outright. But when 43 countries from Africa and Asia sponsored a resolution in the United Nations, all it did was highlight colonial tensions, since Western powers were the only abstentions. On 14th December 1960, UN Resolution 1514 called for an end to colonial rule. Said it was a violation of human rights which the UN couldn't be condoning at all. The aim was to end all the games and pretense and establish a legal basis for coming to the government of Congo's aid and defense. 89 countries voted in favor of the resolution. In the history of the anti-colonial struggle, this was a major event. And guess who stayed on the fence? America, Belgium, the UK, just to name a few names. But the resolution couldn't save Patrice, no matter how much everybody prayed for peace. On January 17, 1961, Congolese agents working for the Belgians moved Lumumba from the camp where they held him and delivered him to a couple of menaces. Moise Chombe showed up on the premises to soak up the final moments of a 7-month plan to topple his nemesis. Patrice, along with 2 supporters, continued to be verbally abused and tortured until they were finally shot by firing squad. Congo's democracy was violently robbed. I hope you've had as much fun watching this video as I've had making this. So feel free to like and subscribe, comment your favorite bits, and sign up to the mailing list.